breathing starts getting a lot faster. Your heart starts racing.
They had got their ropes stuck.
We weren't sure if we were going to make it through the night.
Every day across South Africa, brave men and women risk everything when disaster strikes.
From floods to fires, mountains to highways, these are the real stories of survival and courage. I'm Dineo Mphahlele.
And I'm Natarah Nadesan.
This is SA Rescue Out Alive, an East Coast Radio podcast. Three friends set off on a mountain climbing adventure in a small village near the border between the Free State and KwaZulu-Natal. Despite all their planning for this adrenaline-filled trip, they could not have anticipated what was about to unfold. In a few hours, they'd be left wondering if they'd make it down alive. Gavin Robenheimer has been a mountain rescuer for over 3 decades. He's a member of the Mountain Club of South Africa, an organization that offers various mountaineering activities. The MCSA has a search and rescue arm with 5 permanent volunteer teams, with Gavin among them. On a public holiday in March 2019, a stranded duo needed his help.
They had got their ropes stuck. Now, what that means is that when they had come off the summit of the peak, their ropes had become jammed in the anchor point that you abseil from. And it was made worse because they had been caught in a storm, and their ropes were very wet. And when the ropes get very wet and sodden, they become kind of stickier and heavier, and they couldn't physically pull these ropes down.
Climbing enthusiasts Sean Smith, Mercia Malan, and Stefan Kutzer wanted to conquer one of the few big walls for multi-pitch climbing in South Africa. This one was an 8-pitch rock tower, halfway between Johannesburg and Durban. The two metros are linked by the N3 highway, a key freight route that stretches and meanders for 579 kilometers from one end to the other. On the 20th of March 2019, the friends made the 3 to 4 hour journey from Johannesburg down to the small village of Swinburne. It's a 20-minute drive from the town of Harrismith, a popular halfway stop perched along the N3. The mountain that Sean, Mercia and Stefan were planning on scaling is called Rensburgskop. It rears its conspicuous peak as you approach Swinburne.
You can actually see the mountain as you travel on the N3 from Joburg to Durban, and it's just before you get to Van Riemen's, you can see that rocky outcrop, and it actually, it doesn't look significant when you're on the highway, but the closer you get, you realize how large this mountain is. And the one picture that we took, you can see we look like tiny ants on the wall when you're close up, and it's significant. It really is a huge mountain, and it's actually quite daunting when you get there to the foot of the mountain or the base, and then you look up and think, oh wow, we got to climb this, and it's quite scary at first, and then you get going, and it's just beautiful. It just the climb flows.
That's Sean Smith. He and his 2 mates arrived at their destination and stayed at an inn in the Swinburne village. They had a big climb in the morning, so they tried to get as much rest as possible after the long drive. In the morning, the 3 friends got up after sunrise, but there was not much sun out.
The weather there in Harrismith is so unpredictable. When we started climbing, it was a beautiful sunny day.
With the hope that the weather would come around, the group left the inn and took off for the 150-meter rock tower. While driving to a nearby farm where they would park their car, the conditions improved and things were looking up.
We did a bit of a fist bump, and we always do an equipment check, make sure everything's right. We've got our knots secure, and we just double-check the equipment. That's most important. With climbing, it's so easy to get excited, be filled with adrenaline, and you might miss something. So double-checking, just in terms of safety, is paramount.
With a rock-solid plan in hand, it was time to ascend. They were doing it differently by climbing as a trio instead of the usual pair system of a multi-pitch climb. Now, if you're not a mountain climber, here's what that means. Multi-pitch climbing is when a long climb is broken into sections or pitches because ropes aren't long enough to reach the top in one go. 2 climbers work as a team, and the lead climber goes first, clipping the rope into safety points. The second person, or belayer, manages the other end. At the end of each pitch, the lead climber secures the rope and anchors in. It's now the belayer's turn to move up and does so while removing gear from protection points or pre-placed bolts. They then switch roles to complete the next section and repeat the process until they reach the top. Back at the mountain in Swinburne, Sean takes the first lead as they begin the ascent.
I did the first lead climb. I know Stefan wanted to attempt to do the pitch 3 to 4, which was the most difficult part of the climb that we knew. So we did it in sequence so that he would have the opportunity to do that lead climb. Some of the pitches are shorter than others because there's 3 people. We had Mersha attached to both ropes. I was attached to the one rope, and then Stefan was attached to the other. So I would lead. I would set up a top rope so that Mersha would climb, and then Stefan would follow at the end. Subsequent to that, Stefan would do the lead, belay Mersha up to the next pitch, and then I would follow.
The group seemed to be moving along and getting the hang of it, but as they inched towards the halfway point, they hit a snag.
We got up there to pitch 3, and that's where Mersha started having problems. She was tiring out quite quickly. She was battling with some of her equipment, and we were taking quite a long time. Now, usually when you climb 3 people on 2 ropes, it does take a lot more time. It's far more efficient climbing with 2 people, but that's where we started experiencing delays on the climb.
Mersha decided to retire from the climb. Sean and Stefan helped her upsail to the base and then got back on the rock face. This unplanned mission had knocked more than an hour out of their ascent. Sean and Stefan got back into it. They trudged up the rock tower and reached the top at about 3:30 in the afternoon. They reveled in the achievement and basked in the feeling of freedom.
It's amazing. It really is. It is incredible. When you get to the summit of any difficult climb, you want to take in the views and appreciate what you've just accomplished.
The guys took it all in and toasted the moment.
We took a couple of photos. Stefan took a little canteen of whiskey and we had a sip of that. And it was really nice. It was a good celebration.
They also left their mark at the top of Rensburgskorp.
At the top of that climb, there's a little book. It's a geocache that you can sign and write something in the book. And, climbers that have climbed it before sometimes leave bits and pieces in there. But you can write a message, and we did. And that one was concealed in a tin container and just covered in a few rocks. So you can actually go and retrieve it. There's a pencil and eraser there, or sometimes a pen, and just write a note, and maybe a note to the next climbers that summited after you. So it's quite a nice tradition. And in that journal, we didn't want to take up too much space. You can see it was full already. So we just wrote our names and the date in which we summited. And then with Mersha not being able to summit, we just made sure that we acknowledged that she was on the climb with us.
But that freedom on the summit was short-lived. While the weather had held up on the way up, the clouds began to gather right above Sean and Stefan.
The weather there in Harrismith is so unpredictable, and we got to the summit. When we started climbing, it was a beautiful sunny day. We get to the summit, we're having the celebration, and I kid you not, it was 10 minutes, and we heard thunder, and we saw some weather far out in the distance, and we thought, before this gets any closer, let's start setting up for this descent, because it does take some time to collect your gear, join the ropes, and make sure you do things safely. You configure your knots, and you attach them to your harness, and then you decide on a strategy to descend. Now, by the time we had our ropes configured and joined, that weather was right on top of us. It was scary how quickly it got there.
With the 2 climbers now at a higher altitude, the elements were too close to brave.
I've never experienced weather like that before. There was lightning, there was thunder, there was lightning striking probably about 10 meters away from us. We could feel the rock shudder as it came through. And we thought we had so much time, and it was on top of us before we knew it.
As the violent storm came crashing down, Sean and Stefan knew they had to get back down fast.
I was ready first, and I decided, okay, cool, I'm going to get onto this rope and descend and abseil as quickly as possible. And then he followed, but we were already soaking wet. That rain was coming down, so much so that there was actually waterfalls coming off the mountain, and it was a downpour.
As the lightning continues to flash around them, they became increasingly worried about their safety. They had pieces of metal-based climbing hardware on them, quick draws, ATCs, and carabiners.
We wanted to descend to a stance where we actually had a little bit of shelter, and we were off the summit as quickly as possible.
The two men had divided the climbing sections into thirds. They needed to scale down the first 50-meter section.
So I remember, being halfway through that descent, and it's a very long descent, so it's 50 meters at least. So you are abseiling and you're basically hanging in the air, and you're trusting your gear, you're trusting that rope's holding you, you're trusting that knot that you tied that joined the two ropes. If you do anything wrong, that rope will come undone and you fall 50 meters to your death. So it is a very serious moment, but you make sure that everything's done correctly, and you just got to trust your gear. But when the visibility is near zero, you're completely wet, you've got lightning striking, I was scared. I really was, and I know Stefan was too. He was already setting himself up on the rope while I was descending, and you'd normally wait for the other person to hit or find ground so that there's a bit of slack in the line so you attach yourself. But I remember him coming fairly quickly down straight after me, and we did that in perhaps record time.
About 30 meters down from the top, Sean and Stefan landed on a grassy ledge. They tried to abseil further, but were suddenly in a bind.
Now, what you do when you join two ropes and you descend or abseil from the summit, you pull on the rope where the knot side is. So they're attached to the anchors at the top. So you want to pull on the knot side so that the rope comes through the anchors and you can retrieve your rope. Now, the problem came in when we were doing that. We knew exactly which rope to pull and which rope had the knots in. So we're pulling on this rope, and then all of a sudden there's tension on that rope and it gets stuck.
Sean's account continues.
And now it could be just stuck on, we call it a little chicken neck, or that rock is quite jagged. So we pulled on this rope and then it got stuck. So we thought, no, maybe, it's just stuck on a little piece of rock. We'd shake it a few times, and eventually Stefan and I got to a stage where we attached our prussics to the rope and we put our full weight on that rope that we were trying to pull. It was about 170 kgs pulling on that rope, and it wasn't moving at all. And that's where we started getting a little bit worried, because you definitely needed that rope and we needed it back. So we had a bit of a problem.
Having tried everything they could, the desperate and rain-soaked friends couldn't see any other way out. It was time to alert the authorities.
I got the call at about 6:30 that night from our counterparts in Gauteng, from their rescue team, because these climbers had phoned Gauteng Rescue asking for them to get hold of KZN to come and help them. They were speaking directly to me and saying that they'd got their ropes stuck.
Mountain rescuer Gavin Robenheimer fell in love with the mountain at a young age. The bug bit when, at 13 years old, he joined his older brother to hitchhike from Pietermaritzburg to Cathedral Peak in the Drakensberg, where they spent a few days exploring the terrain.
Well, it was in July of 1979, I think it was. It was just a magical experience of hiking up to the top of the Drakensberg in a little bit of snow, and then it snowed lightly that night, and it was this amazing experience of being at 3,200 meters odd. I'd never been there, and seeing snowfall for the first time, and it just captured me.
It turned out his brother's neighbor in Hilton was also a rock climber. He would later take Gavin and his brother out on a climb in the Umgeni Valley near Howick.
I'd been very interested in rock climbing before then, but never done it. And I knew I was going to love it before I even got into it. So it was a totally natural thing for me to do. even in the same year, in July of 1986, we climbed Monk's Cow, the three of us. That's in the Central Berg. And even did a bit of ice climbing on the way down from the mountain. And that was the first time I'd ice climbed. And since then I've climbed, I think, every ice climbing season since then, except for one. And there is lots of ice climbing in the Drakensberg.
Gavin has been in the field of mountain rescue since 1992. He served as the president of the KwaZulu-Natal chapter of the Mountain Club of South Africa. It's an organization whose founding was partly prompted by the 1889 stranding of a climbing party in the thick cloud that drapes Table Mountain in Cape Town. Gavin is currently the convener of mountain rescue in KwaZulu-Natal, or KZN, as the province is popularly called. He does this life-saving work alongside his full-time job as a guide and mountaineering instructor.
We have got in KZN approximately 30 people who are trained to different degrees. Some are very experienced and some are beginners of that 30-odd people. On any one rescue, you might take 4 to 8 people usually on a rescue, depending on the terrain, the means of transport, and what job you expect to do at the other end. The bulk of the team comes from Pietermaritzburg and Durban, but we've got quite a large team in Underberg area, and then a few members in the northern Drakensberg. And we call on those people to come and help or even operate on their own if it's a very simple rescue. And when I say a simple rescue, you could get a situation where somebody has got a twisted ankle 1 kilometer from the ranger's office and you just want to send somebody up to help them down, for instance. It doesn't require a helicopter or anything like that. And we'll call on those people at times.
The 21st of March 2019, Human Rights Day in South Africa, was one of those times Gavin and his team were called upon.
Their ropes had become jammed in the anchor point that you abseil from. And it was made worse because they'd been caught in a storm and their ropes were very wet. And when the ropes get very wet and sodden, they become kind of stickier and heavier and they couldn't physically pull these ropes down.
Gavin explains that in rescue operations, they first try to understand what the exact problem is and see if there is a way to talk those needing rescuing through their predicament, or in this case, down it.
You've got to work out what degree of an emergency is this. Does this require a response immediately? Is there a real medical problem, or is a medical problem going to start to occur later? And very often in mountain rescue, we have a kind of unwritten policy that we won't respond immediately. It's not a situation that you get a call and you rush off in 5 minutes with the wrong equipment, with the wrong people, responding to a situation which you're then ill-prepared for.
After speaking to Gavin, Sean and Stefan tried to climb back up towards the summit. This was what Gavin had advised them to do in a bid to free the rope. Their attempts were futile. Sean says Stefan's fingers had been bleeding from when they had initially tugged at the rope on their climb down while escaping the storm. Stefan had also forgotten his headlamp.
It was dark, it was cold, and eventually we did reach the summit again. We actually detached the rope where we could see the knot, but we couldn't see where the other rope was stuck at all. And that was actually quite a scary situation because we had to down climb with one rope. So we couldn't abseil the usual way, and then we had to down climb the way we came. And it was quite scary to do that because at some stages you can take a very big fall.
Gavin kept in touch with the stranded climbers over the course of an hour.
Then they came back to me later on and reported that they had in fact managed to retrieve one of the ropes. So they had one 50-meter rope with them. And I tried to explain to them that with their 50-meter rope that they now had, they could in fact get down this peak, but via a different route than what they had gone up. And they'd spent most of the day up on this mountain and been hit by storms and thunderstorms. And they basically said to me, look, we're beyond our tether here. We cannot find our way down this mountain. Please rescue us.
We were freezing cold. Our gear that we had on, especially our clothing, was not sufficient for that cold. That day was an ice storm that pulled in, so we were quite desperate at that stage.
2 hours away in the KZN Midlands town of Hilton, the rescue wheels were now being set in motion.
I'd raised a team. There were just 4 of us with a standby paramedic. You just had to have good technical mountaineers involved, no beginners. There was one of my counterparts in Pietermaritzburg. He was available. And then there were 2 people from Durban, including a rock climber who's capable of climbing at a very high grade of rock climbing. We've got rescue depots. The major mountain rescue depot is at Marion Hill at the Department of Health there. The ropes, it came from that depot. And we have also got another depot at Gray's Hospital in Pietermaritzburg. We took what rescue equipment we deemed necessary for this. And the main thing here was we needed long ropes.
Nigel Tonkin, Carl Dreyer and John Sargood were the fellow rescuers that heeded the urgent call and joined Gavin that night to head up to Swinburne.
We drove up there in 2 cars and there were storms all the way from Hilton, where I live, all the way to Swinburne, and there was still lightning going on.
We were both quite scared. We were speaking to Mersha. Thank goodness we had her on the cell phone. So she at that stage was also attempting to get hold of helicopter rescue, and it was impossible for helicopters to come in because of the visibility. There was close to zero visibility, and that would have been incredibly dangerous for them. So the amazing thing is that Gavin and his team, they, on a public holiday, they decided to dispatch from Pietermaritzburg and from Durban. And I think that's approximately a 3-hour journey, up to where we were. And by the time they get there, it's still another hour and a half walk in to where we were at the base of the climb. Stefan and I we were not happy campers at that stage. We were feeling a little bit helpless, and we were freezing cold and starting to get quite worried. We definitely did some man-hugging there, and we tried to cheer each other up. We told some stories, but eventually, you're shaking and shivering so much that you don't really feel like talking. You're just sitting there with your own thoughts and then hoping that help is coming. It was a dire situation at that point, and we weren't sure if we were going to make it through the night.
When Gavin and his team arrived at Rensburg's Corp at around 9 p.m., Mercia was at the bottom of the mountain. But instead of feeling relief, Sean and Stefan's misery was about to be prolonged.
We actually got a message from Mercia that they had arrived, but it wasn't the best of news. It was bad news at the stage, because we heard they've decided not to attempt the climb because the conditions are too bad. The rain was still falling. It would have been too dangerous to attempt the climb until the rain had subsided. We were actually quite downtrodden after that news. We had lost almost all hope, and feeling quite depressed that the guys weren't even going to climb, because we knew how long it would take for them to climb once they started. When you're hypothermic, you are quite disorientated. We were seeing things. There was mist all around and fog, so we thought we heard voices. There was nothing there. We thought we saw things. We thought we saw light, but there was nothing there for hours. So, if it wasn't for Stefan being there with me, I would have been in a complete state. But at least we were in this together, so we had some sort of camaraderie there, and we knew we were in it together. But we went through various stages of grief, per se, and with the hypothermia, as it sets in, you, as I say, you're quite disorientated, but your mind's not quite there. You start panicking, your breathing starts getting a lot faster, your heart starts racing, and your body's just trying to do what it can to keep warm and survive.
For Sean and Stefan, it felt as if time was running out. Despite the conditions, the rescue team decided to proceed with caution. Here's Sean again.
They were in contact with us, and then they heard, they could probably hear from our voices and what we were saying, that we were starting to get into quite a serious situation with hypothermic symptoms. And then they made a decision. I don't know how that decision-making process worked, but the decision was made for the guys to climb in the rain and on that wet surface, and thankfully so. So we heard that they started climbing.
We all had to rope up. 2 of us, myself and the young guy from Durban, a very good climber, and then we had to trace our way up the mountain using the same bolts as the 2 who are now stuck. We followed their route all the way up, and I dragged a a long rescue rope behind us, and then attached it high up on the mountain to another bolted anchor point. The two of us then carried on up towards where we knew the two people were sitting, waiting on a ledge. And another colleague then ascended the rope which I had anchored to the mountain, pulling another rope with him. We needed two ropes. It's got to do with how you get the ropes back down afterwards. You've got to pull one side of it. So anyway, there was another person climbing up through the mist behind us on these clamps which slide up the rope.
After what felt like an eternity, an end to Sean and Stefan's ordeal was in sight. Their valiant rescuers were within earshot.
Eventually, after a couple of hours, we started seeing light through the fog. We started hearing these voices, and we were just elated. We couldn't believe that the guys were finally there. We were so relieved, really, really happy. And the guys, I think, got to us, just in the nick of time.
Myself and Nigel, we arrived in the dark at midnight, in fact, and found these two climbers sitting on a ledge. From a medical point of view, they were not particularly bad. They were very cold and starting to shiver, but they said they were quite happy to abseil now down the ropes which we had set down the mountain.
It was still cold. I took my ATC or my belay device and I was trying to put it on the rope, and I dropped it all the way down the mountain. I never saw it again. I couldn't even hold on to that device. I was so cold. So luckily they set up stations on the different stances. So we could abseil once we had the ropes configured and attached to us. We were able to abseil quite safely. I was able to use my one hand more so than the other, and I could get down to the next station. And by that time, you're feeling a little bit more upbeat. They set up a very efficient process, and once you start with that, you get down to the next level fairly quickly, and then the guys follow in quick succession.
They went down. It's about a 50-meter abseil down to the next point where these other, what we call fixed lines were, and where my other colleague was waiting for them, and he made sure that they now changed over from one rope system to the next. They were fine, and then they abseiled the last 60-odd meters to the ground, and where the other colleague, the fourth colleague, was sitting waiting with coffee and tea for them.
I got down to the base first, and then I think it was John who was ready for us, and he gave me some hot tea, blankets. I was flippin' relieved. I was so relieved just to get some warm liquid in me. And then I heard on the radio that Stefan's in quite a serious predicament. He wasn't sounding good. He was speaking, a different language. So they just asked Carl just to keep an eye on him at the next stance, and then they got him down fairly quickly and treated us both for hypothermia.
Just before 2 a.m., 17 hours since that spirited fist bump at the base of Rensburgskorp, Sean and Stefan were reunited with Mercia. She was waiting with warm clothes and blankets that she had fetched from the inn earlier. The rain had been relentless throughout the rescue operation. It required seasoned mountaineers to navigate the slippery slopes. But Gavin, having been back on familiar terrain that night, was also a boon for the mission.
It's a climb that has got these bolts in, so the bolts do help show you which way to go, and you consider a bolt to be 100% strong. One of the reasons I said to my colleagues that I will take this and lead this rescue is that I'd done the first ascent. I'd actually set these bolts in to the mountain. I've climbed it many times, so I knew exactly where to go, and there was no issue, and I knew the lengths of the climbing sections and what ropes we would need and so on. A friend and I, we climbed that peak in 2004, and we were the first humans to set foot on top of it, and it was a magical experience. And the climb is called Long Bolt to Freedom.
After lightning and thunder crashed their euphoric celebration at the summit and sent them cowering and clambering over the rocks, it had indeed been a long bolt down to freedom and safety for Sean and Stefan. It was established that the two didn't need any further medical assistance. A short while later, the relieved climbers and their rescuers sat for a parting coffee at a nearby filling station shop. They then went their separate ways. Sean, Mercia and Stefan returned to their inn for a much-needed rest and recuperation. Gavin, Nigel, John and Carl got back on the N3 highway and headed home to Hilton, Pietermaritzburg and Durban. For Sean, the ordeal on Rensburgskorp was a life-changing experience, and he's now paying it forward.
I had such an appreciation for Gavin and the MCSA team. I was a part of MCSA in Joburg, and then when I moved to Cape Town, I wanted to be involved with the search and rescue with MCSA, but unfortunately I landed up Blouberg side, and we're at least half an hour away from most of the mountains, so it's very difficult to respond in a timely manner. So then, I knew that there was an NSRI station close to where I stayed, and I actually went to go and follow up and find out what they were all about. And I've always had a love for the sea. And then I joined the program early 2022, and I've loved it ever since. I wanted to pay it forward, and make sure that I can save a few lives. And, while I have the ability, and NSRI and Sea Rescue has given me that tenfold, and I really have a huge appreciation for what we do and the people that volunteer for these organizations.
This podcast is dedicated to all those who put their lives at risk, who come to the rescue when every second counts. I'm Dineo Mphahlele. This podcast series, produced by the East Coast Radio Newswatch team, is dedicated to the men and women who risk everything to save lives.
To hear more of their stories, subscribe to SA Rescue Out Alive at ecr.co.za under podcasts, or wherever you get your favorite podcasts.